Hi, thanks for joining. My name is Lindsay Woncourt, and I'm the Project Creation Manager for Adventure Scientists. And our presentation today is Where People and Wildlife Collide, leveraging road cyclists to collect high-quality data to identify wildlife corridors and inform transportation planning. In 2019, we presented at this conference and talked about the lead up to this project. And now in 2021, I'm going to talk about how it went and what's happened since. So Adventure Scientists is a nonprofit based in Bozeman, Montana, and we partner with researchers to help them design, build, and manage community science projects and recruit and train volunteers from the outdoor community. We work with partners that work in environmental and human health issues and help them collect high quality data at scale. We've had over 130 projects in our 10-year history. By leveraging volunteers from the outdoor community, we're able to help our partners overcome financial and physical barriers of collecting data at scale, and that can be spatial or temporal. And using these volunteers that already have skill set for being in outdoor spaces, they're able to focus on data quality rather than the basics of outdoor recreation. This map shows where all of our volunteers are coming from. These are the starting points of their expeditions for collecting data. So we have had volunteers on every continent and every ocean, and like I said, these are just the starting points. So we've had folks sailing across the ocean, doing hikes across South America. We've collected the highest known plant life from Mount Everest, and we've had deep sea divers collecting microplastics as well. So our volunteers really are able to get just about anywhere you might need them to. So that's what we do. And I'm going to talk about the problem we're helping solve. So wildlife vehicle collisions are a major problem, not just for wildlife, but also human health. There's 1 to 2 million crashes each year with large animals, which results in approximately 200 deaths and 26,000 injuries. And that's $8 billion in damages that we're looking at. And that comes from a Pew report. While the insurance companies and state transportation agencies and wildlife agencies bear the financial burden, community members, families, and wildlife bear the physical and emotional burden. Montana is ranked second for the highest rate of collision with a 1 in 47 chance of having a wildlife vehicle collision each year. And that comes from State Farm's annual report that was published last year. There are many mitigation strategies to use, but knowing where to implement those strategies is not always clear. So in seeing what that problem is and what we do, we think that we're a really good fit to help with mitigating wildlife vehicle collisions. So all of our projects need to have 3 main criteria. And the first one is the project must address an environmental or human health issue, which clearly this affects both wildlife as well as human health. The second, there must be a clear pathway from data collection to lasting change. So we don't want to collect data that's not going to be valuable to a partner. It needs to can't just sit in a data set, it needs to be used. And so understanding that there are mitigation strategies that need more data, that's clearly a tangible pathway. And then the third is that there must be a clear need for outdoor skill set. And this might not be as clear cut if you haven't heard of this project before, but what we ended up doing is training road cyclists to collect data, because by being on their bikes rather than driving, they're able to slow down and see more roadkill and live animals, as well as being able to access a very large swath of land by having folks who are already out riding just collecting data while they did it. So in 2019 and 2020, we had our Montana Wildlife Connectivity Project. And adventure scientists partnered with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Park, as well as Montana Department of Transportation, to work on filling that data gap of understanding where those hotspots were to know where to implement mitigation strategies. So we worked with partners to develop protocols that would help fill those data needs for them. And then we recruited cyclists from our existing network and targeted approaches through the larger cycling communities. So we had folks that were already doing cross-country trips to add this into their mix, and going to bike shops and seeing what kind of group rides they had going, and seeing if they could recruit from their networks as well. And so these volunteers went through an online training that we developed with our learning management system that explained the need for the data and had videos explaining exactly what they would be doing in the field. And then they were able to select what segment they wanted to collect on. And so there were 25-mile segments they could choose, and they would ride out one way and back the other, so that it would be 50 miles of cycling for each volunteer. We built an app that volunteers used to collect the data so that it was consistent across the state. And you can see in this left corner what some of the questions were in that app that the volunteers were filling out. So they were looking for infrastructure, and if so, what kind of fencing was present, what condition was it in, what kind of animal are you seeing? Is it alive or dead? Is it injured? Is it on the road? Is it next to the road? Is it off the road? And so volunteers collected all of that data and put that into the database, which we do have available upon request. And so here is a short video sharing the perspective of a few volunteers in the field.
I got involved in the program because I bike a lot in the Gallatin Valley, and when you're biking along the roads, you see a lot more smaller animals that you don't normally see when you're driving a vehicle down the road. And so I just thought it would be interesting to document all that.
This project's important to me because nobody likes to hit animals with their car, and we can figure out how to live with wildlife in a more peaceful manner.
I do a lot of road riding around our hometown, and I've been seeing a lot of roadkill. And it surprised me that it seemed like there was more than there usually has been over the years. So getting an opportunity to evaluate it a little bit more closely has been the most interesting part for me.
Along the way, we're looking for any roadkill we see on the road itself or down in the ditches, and then record all the information that we know and send it back to adventure scientists.
We're supposed to scan the road going out 25 miles and back 25 miles, looking for roadkill. And when we find it, we're supposed to stop it and use the phone app to identify it and the circumstances surrounding the roadkill, such as fences and other man-made structures.
I never really thought that much about wildlife vehicle accidents and what they mean both to the wildlife and to the humans. So it's really made me think about that a lot more.
It's really fun to do, and to go out and see other parts of Montana. I encourage people to look outside of their communities for a route that might suit them, and it's a chance for them to get out and cycle someplace else.
Great, and then that was what the volunteer experience was like. And we also equipped them with safety equipment, because that's something that's obviously a great concern if you're having folks going on Montana highways, potentially without service. You want to make sure folks are safe. So we did equip them with safety vests and make sure that everyone had helmets, and went through a training to talk about how to cycle safely, as well as hosting volunteer meetups. They were all virtual because this was during COVID. But hosting virtual meetups where folks could talk about any questions or challenges they had, and if a route wasn't particularly safe, making sure that we crossed that off the list so that we didn't have volunteers going back there in the future. So then our team built this dashboard that it's a live dashboard so volunteers can see what data's come in, as well as partners, of course, and any interested community members. Currently, the project is on pause because, like I mentioned before, it's really important to us that the data we're collecting is being used to implement change. Our partners, we're going to reevaluate what data would be most helpful to them to make sure that they can create the strategies to actually reduce collisions. And so while they're in the process of making sure that the data they want is what we're getting them, we're going to have our volunteers pause so that they're not putting energy into collecting data that might not be valuable to the partners. But here's that dashboard, which I'm happy to share. It's open to the public. And I think I mentioned that the data that we collected is also available, and on our website, which is adventurescientists.org, there's a data request portal so that folks can check it out and see specifically what's been collected. And so if you zoom in, you can see all these little dots, and each one is an observation of wildlife. So let's see, it'll say when it was collected, who collected it, what the status of the animal was, which was often dead. There's photos for size. And yeah, we would have control data as well, which is important. Every 30 minutes, the volunteer would stop and collect a control. And yeah, so like I said, there's photos within it. You can see the timeline. Because it was during COVID, there were supposed to be 4 collections sessions last year, but we ended up canceling the first one because we didn't know how to exactly deploy volunteers in the field safely at that point. But we worked on getting a system in place, and by June, we were able to get off the ground. And these were 10-day field seasons where volunteers would go out. So that was providing a snapshot across the state for a specific time rather than having it opportunistic where it might not lead to the same quality of data. So, oops, there we go. You can see we had volunteers across a good chunk of the state, and there were some areas that was harder to get volunteers into. And we believe that's largely because of COVID, because folks weren't able to drive with a friend. And if you have to drive really far away, say 6 hours, because it's such a large state to get to some of these less populous areas, it was a big ask for volunteers. And so we believe pretty strongly that we'll be able to, if the project gets off the ground again after the partners reevaluate their data needs, we do feel confident we would be able to recruit and get volunteers deployed into a broader area. So as I mentioned, understanding how to reduce collisions is well aligned with our mission and those 3 criteria I talked about as well. I'm here not only to share about this project, but also to learn what other data gaps exist in this field. I'm really looking forward to any questions you may have and hopefully learning more about your data needs as well. Thank you.